Top of the day to you and welcome to KLTV's weekly wind-up with me, Dave Hodgson. Now, Post Office, Royal Mail. Know the difference? Our guest is Adrian Wales, now a business coach, but someone who has spent decades working for, well, let's have him explain to us. Adrian, which did you work for and how long for?
Well, I worked for Royal Mail for probably about 6 years, and I worked for Post Office Limited for the best part of 30 years. So both organisations, and they are very, very different.
How different?
Well, obviously nowadays Royal Mail is a privatised organisation. Post Office is still wholly owned by government, so it's still very much in the public domain, where taxpayers' money is obviously going towards, to some extent, paying for post office services nowadays.
So despite similarities, it's chalk and cheese, isn't it?
Kind of. They are sister organisations, and they have a very long relationship that goes back something like 350 years, and probably the majority of people struggle to recognise the difference. But essentially, Royal Mail is everything to do with posting, deliveries and collections, and post offices are those physical shops that you see in various parts of the country that sell stamps and postal orders. Exactly. Yeah.
Well, you've had a long and illustrious career, as I said earlier, in the post office. Which posts, and there's no pun intended there, by the way, did you fulfil?
I joined as a postman. In that time working for Royal Mail, I did driving, so I did collections, deliveries. I also carried some cash to local post offices. Within post office, I worked on the counter, so at the front end, at the sharp end, if you like, in some of the major post offices, the largest Crown offices. I was also an area manager for sub-postmasters. In the last 10 years of my career, I worked on some pretty big projects, some that didn't endear ourselves too well to the public, such as post office closures and that kind of thing. So I kind of saw the full extent of the organisation in that time.
So how have both changed during the years and subsequently since you left working for them?
Pretty enormously, really. When I joined, it was the GPO. It was one company. In those days, it even included the likes of Telecom. It included the likes of Gyrobank.
Yes, of course, it was post office telephones in my day.
Absolutely, yeah.
When post office telephone kiosks were red.
Indeed.
And were up to the end, really, weren't they?
Yeah, it was a huge monolithic organisation. There were 24,000 post offices in those days. There were 2 deliveries, you'll remember, first and second delivery. We had to get the first delivery out by 9:30 at the latest. Of course, the second delivery is gone. In terms of Royal Mail. The
first, from my point of view, has morphed into the second one.
Pretty much. Yeah, I mean, I don't exactly know what time the post would finish.
You are not speaking on behalf of the post office.
Not at all, no. Yeah. In terms of post offices, well, physically, there's probably around half the number of post offices that there were. But probably one of the biggest changes is in terms of types of transactions. So, you know, if you think back 20, 30 years ago, most people would have either a pension book, a child benefit book, some kind of income support, green gyros. You paid bills at your post office. You picked up things like TV licence, savings stamps, telephone savings stamps.
And things to do with getting your driving licence.
Yeah, absolutely. You could even buy a dog licence in those days.
Oh, just show. So it was really busy at one time. What's gone wrong? I mean, for instance, there's much controversy now regarding, well, let's say the closure of suburban and rural post offices, and now, I mean, for instance, Leeds has lost its main post office many a year ago. It's now a high-class restaurant, and I'm sure, although there is one down by the covered market, it's nowhere near the size to cover everything that post office used to cover, and I would think makes for a bit of frustration.
Yeah, well, the world has changed hugely in the last 20 or 30 years. And I think that one of the first things to say is that customers who used to have to go to the post office no longer have to use the post office. So, for example, probably the single biggest difference is that all those pension allowance books that you'll remember from many a year gone by, they're all gone. The government in the late 90s had an orchestrated campaign to encourage customers to have their benefits paid straight into the bank accounts, thus cutting out the need to visit their local post office.
And the needs for getting and receiving cash at the post
Absolutely.
office. Yeah.
And of course, as I said earlier, with all those cash transactions, they would buy savings stamps, they would pay bills, they would buy postage stamps, etc. So all that business went over a relatively short space of time.
Yeah.
Now, one of the things the post office has been great at is diversifying. So over the last few years, they've added things like foreign currency, travel insurance, even mortgages, all kinds of new financial service transactions that you can get there, which has helped to, if you like, stem the flood of people not using the post office. But even nowadays, you know, even 2 or 3 years ago, you may have always chosen to use the post office to tax your car. Now you may very well do it online.
Yeah, but what about the future now that the competition is much fiercer with more delivery firms than you can shake a stick at?
Well, I can only speak from the time that I was at the post office.
Not officially, I understand.
And in my view, there will always be a post office. There will always be a need for people to have that face-to-face contact, that service that they won't get online. But it may not be in the size that we have nowadays. And as I say, if you look back, or even over the last 15, 20 years, how much people's habits have changed.
Yep.
You know, it's not just the post office that's affected by things like online shopping. Although there is a plus side of that, and it of course is that Royal Mail has seen an increase in many of that kind of service because people shop online. They obviously need it delivering as well. So there is an upside to that story.
Yeah.
I think there's a strong future for both Post Office and Royal Mail, but it may not look exactly as it does today.
As it does now, understood. Just lastly then, you've moved on to coaching. So tell me just a tiny bit about that.
Okay. My passion through probably 20 odd years of managing both postmasters and people who were direct employees was always in development. It was always in people development. So I took a decision to leave the post office a couple of years ago to carry on doing just that. Now I work with small businesses in terms of making their businesses as good as it can be, based on 20 years of doing this similar thing in the post office.
So you know the ins and outs and help them to get there through it.
That's the idea, certainly.
Got it. My thanks to business coach then Adrian Wales for taking part in today's weekly wind-up. Thanks to the crew for making the programme look so easy, and in particular to you, my loves, for watching KLTV. If you want to get in touch with us about what you've heard today, it's in the usual place. You'll see our logo for it. This is Dave Hodgson, and mind how you go, folks.